In 1996, journalist Gary Webb published a series of articles in the San Jose Mercury News, claiming the CIA had facilitated the flow of cocaine into American inner cities to fund Nicaraguan Contra rebels. The cocaine was converted to crack and sold in black neighborhoods. The profits bought weapons for an illegal war in Central America. The response from the CIA, major newspapers, and the government was immediate. Deny everything. Attack the journalist. Discredit the investigation. Destroy Gary Webb's career. Within a year, Webb was fired. His reputation was ruined. Major media outlets published hit pieces questioning his reporting. The CIA issued denials. The story was buried. In 2004, Gary Webb shot himself twice in the head with a .38 caliber revolver. The coroner ruled it suicide. Many people don't believe that, but regardless of how he died, the damage was done. His career was destroyed for reporting a story that was substantially true. Because here's what's now confirmed. The CIA did work with drug traffickers who were flooding American cities with cocaine. They did fund the Contras with drug money. They did turn a blind eye to the crack epidemic devastating black communities because stopping it would interfere with their covert war. The CIA didn't invent cocaine, but they used the cocaine trade to fund illegal wars. And when a journalist exposed it, they destroyed him. This is the complete history of cocaine, the sacred plant that became a global commodity, the drug that built cartels and funded wars, the substance that destroyed communities and enriched governments, the chemical that showed exactly how expendable poor people are when profits and politics are at stake. And it started thousands of years ago in the mountains of South America. Cocaine comes from the coca plant Erythroxylum coca native to the Andes Mountains in South America. Indigenous peoples in Peru, Bolivia, and Colombia have used coca leaves for at least 5,000 years. Archaeological evidence shows coca use dating back to 3000 BCE. For the Inca and other Andean cultures, coca was sacred. It suppressed hunger, increased endurance at high altitudes, and had spiritual significance. People would chew coca leaves, mixed with lime or ash, to release the active alkaloids. The effect was mild stimulation, nothing like modern cocaine. It helped with altitude sickness, provided energy for labor, and was used in religious ceremonies. Coca wasn't recreational. It was medicinal and spiritual. It was controlled by priests and rulers. It was part of the social and religious structure of Andean civilization. Then the Spanish arrived. When Spanish conquistadors invaded South America in the 1500s, they initially tried to ban coca use, viewing it as a pagan practice. But they quickly realized coca made indigenous laborers more productive. Workers chewing coca could work longer hours in silver mines and on plantations without food or rest. So the Spanish changed their policy. They encouraged coca use among enslaved indigenous workers. They taxed it. They controlled the supply. Coca became a tool of colonial exploitation, a drug to extract more labor from enslaved people while keeping them dependent and compliant. The Spanish Catholic Church even collected tithes on coca production. They condemned it as sinful while profiting from its sale. Classic colonial hypocrisy. For 300 years, coca remained largely confined to South America and indigenous populations. Europeans knew about it, but didn't use it widely. That changed in the mid-1800s, when European chemists learned to isolate cocaine from coca leaves. In 1859, German chemist Albert Niemann isolated pure cocaine from coca leaves. This was revolutionary. Pure cocaine was far more potent than chewing coca leaves. It could be administered in precise doses. It could be injected, snorted, or dissolved in drinks. By the 1880s, cocaine was everywhere in Europe and America. It was marketed as a miracle drug. Pharmaceutical companies sold it as a cure for depression, fatigue, alcoholism, morphine addiction, and dozens of other ailments. It was completely legal and unregulated. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, was a cocaine enthusiast. He wrote Über Coca in 1884, praising cocaine's benefits. He used it himself. He prescribed it to patients for depression and anxiety. He recommended it to friends and colleagues. He even gave it to his fiancée to make her strong. Freud later realized cocaine was dangerous and addictive. He stopped recommending it publicly, but the damage was done. His endorsement had legitimized cocaine in medical and social circles. Cocaine became a common ingredient in patent medicines unregulated drugs sold with exaggerated health claims. The most famous was Coca-Cola. The original Coca-Cola formula, created in 1886, contained cocaine extracted from coca leaves. The coca in Coca-Cola literally referred to cocaine. Coca-Cola was marketed as a brain tonic and energy drink. Each serving contained approximately 9 milligrams of cocaine. Not a massive dose, but enough to be noticeable. People drank Coca-Cola for the stimulant effect. Cocaine was also sold in pure form for snorting or injection. It was available at pharmacies. You didn't need a prescription. Anyone could buy it. Wealthy people used cocaine recreationally at parties. Workers used it to stay alert during long shifts. Soldiers used it to suppress fear and fatigue. And then the backlash began. By the early 1900s, reports of cocaine addiction, overdoses, and psychosis were accumulating. Doctors noticed patients developing severe dependency. Some users became violent or paranoid. Deaths from overdoses were increasing. But the real driver of cocaine prohibition wasn't medical concern, it was racism. In the American South, there was a moral panic about black men using cocaine. Newspapers published sensationalized stories about cocaine, crazed Negroes committing crimes. Police claimed cocaine made black men superhuman and impervious to bullets, completely false, but widely believed. The racist mythology around cocaine and black men was used to justify harsher policing and stricter drug laws. Southern politicians argued that cocaine needed to be banned to protect white women from black men supposedly emboldened by the drug. This wasn't about public health. It was about social control and racial oppression. In 1914, the US passed the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act, which regulated and taxed the production and distribution of cocaine and opiates. It didn't outright ban cocaine, but it made it much harder to obtain legally. Cocaine was removed from Coca-Cola in 1903, replaced with caffeine. By the 1920s, cocaine use had declined significantly in the United States. It remained popular in some circles, jazz musicians, artists, wealthy partygoers, but it was no longer mainstream. Cocaine became associated with counterculture and criminality. For several decades, cocaine was relatively uncommon in the US. Heroin and amphetamines were more popular. Cocaine was expensive and harder to obtain. It remained a niche drug for the wealthy. Then in the 1970s and 80s, everything changed. Colombian drug cartels industrialized cocaine production and flooded the American market with cheap, high-quality cocaine. And the consequences were catastrophic. In the 1970s, Colombia became the global center of cocaine production. The country had the right climate for growing coca, a weak government that couldn't control rural areas, and a population willing to participate in the drug trade for economic survival. Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel became the most powerful cocaine trafficking organization in history. They controlled production, smuggling routes, and distribution networks. At the peak of his power in the 1980s, Escobar was one of the richest men in the world, with an estimated net worth of $30 billion. The Medellin cartel smuggled tons of cocaine into the United States every week. They used planes, boats, submarines, tunnels, and human mules. They bribed officials, killed rivals, and terrorized anyone who opposed them. Escobar's brutality was legendary. He ordered the assassinations of judges, journalists, police officers, and politicians. He bombed buildings. He financed terrorism. He declared war on the Colombian government when they tried to extradite him to the United States. But Escobar also cultivated a Robin Hood image. He built housing for the poor in Medellin. He funded soccer fields and schools. He gave money to communities. For many poor Colombians, Escobar was a hero who stood up to the government and shared his wealth. That's the genius of cartel propaganda. You murder thousands while building a few houses, and people remember the houses. The cocaine boom of the 1980s transformed American drug culture. Cocaine became the drug of Wall Street, Hollywood, and the music industry. It was expensive, glamorous, and associated with success. Bankers snorted it in office bathrooms. Musicians sang about it. Movies depicted it as the drug of choice for the wealthy and powerful. Cocaine was everywhere. Studio 54, Wall Street trading floors, celebrity parties. It was the drug of the Reagan-era excess, greed, and conspicuous consumption. But while wealthy people were snorting powder cocaine at parties, something much more dangerous was developing in poor urban neighborhoods. Crack cocaine. Crack is cocaine that's been chemically processed with baking soda and water to create a smokable form. Smoking crack delivers cocaine to the brain faster than snorting, creating an intense, immediate high that lasts only a few minutes. The crash is severe, leading to intense cravings and rapid addiction. Crack appeared in American cities in the early 1980s. It was cheap. A single dose could cost $5 to $10, compared to $50 to $100 for powder cocaine. It was intensely addictive, and it devastated communities. The crack epidemic hit poor black neighborhoods hardest. Between 1984 and 1994, crack addiction destroyed families, fueled violent crime, and overwhelmed social services in cities across America. Homicide rates skyrocketed. Incarceration rates exploded. Entire neighborhoods were destabilized, and the government response was brutal, punitive, and racially targeted. In 1986, Congress passed the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, which created a massive sentencing disparity between powder cocaine and crack cocaine. Possession of 5 grams of crack carried a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years in prison. To get the same sentence for powder cocaine, you needed 500 grams. 100 to 1 sentencing disparity. Same drug, different form, wildly different punishment. The disparity wasn't accidental. It was designed to target black crack users while being lenient on white powder cocaine users. Powder cocaine was associated with wealthy white people. Crack was associated with poor black people. The laws reflected that bias explicitly. The result? Mass incarceration of black Americans for nonviolent drug offenses. Families destroyed. Communities destabilized. Millions of people imprisoned for addiction rather than treated. And while the government was waging a war on drugs against poor black communities, the CIA was facilitating cocaine trafficking to fund illegal wars. Here's what's now confirmed through declassified documents, congressional investigations, and CIA admissions. In the 1980s, the CIA supported Nicaraguan Contra rebels fighting the leftist Sandinista government. Congress had banned funding the Contras through the Boland Amendment, so the CIA found alternative funding sources. One of those sources was cocaine trafficking. The CIA worked with Contra-connected drug traffickers who were smuggling cocaine into the United States. The agency turned a blind eye to trafficking in exchange for the traffickers providing money and weapons to the Contras. In some cases, the CIA directly facilitated smuggling by providing logistical support and protection. The cocaine flooded into American cities, was converted to crack, and sold in black neighborhoods. The profits funded an illegal war in Nicaragua. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is confirmed by the Kerry Committee Report 1988, Senate investigation confirming Contra involvement in drug trafficking with CIA knowledge. The CIA Inspector General's Report 1998 admitted the CIA worked with drug traffickers and failed to stop cocaine smuggling. Declassified documents showing CIA knowledge of trafficking and deliberate inaction. Gary Webb's Dark Alliance series in 1996 exposed these connections. The response from the establishment was to destroy him. The New York Times, Washington Post, and Los Angeles Times published articles attacking Webb's reporting. The CIA issued denials. Webb was isolated, discredited, and eventually fired. But he was right. The CIA admitted as much in their own Inspector General's report 2 years later. By then, the damage to Webb's career was irreversible. In 2004, Webb died from 2 gunshot wounds to the head, ruled a suicide. Whether it was suicide or something else, the message was clear. Expose government-sanctioned drug trafficking, and your career dies. The Medellin cartel's reign ended in the 1990s. Pablo Escobar was killed by Colombian police in 1993. The Cali cartel briefly took over before being dismantled. Mexican cartels filled the vacuum and now control most cocaine trafficking to the United States. But the fundamental dynamics haven't changed. Cocaine is still produced primarily in Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. It's still smuggled through Central America and Mexico. It's still sold in American cities. The players change. The business continues. And now, there's a new crisis. Fentanyl-laced cocaine. Mexican cartels have started cutting cocaine with fentanyl, a synthetic opioid 50 times stronger than heroin. Users think they're snorting cocaine. They overdose from fentanyl poisoning. They die before they realize something's wrong. Cocaine deaths have spiked in recent years primarily due to fentanyl contamination. In 2022, over 27,000 Americans died from cocaine-involved overdoses. Many of those deaths were from fentanyl, not cocaine toxicity. Cartels mix fentanyl into cocaine for several reasons. It's cheap, it increases addiction, it creates repeat customers, and most users can't tell the difference until it's too late. This is the final stage of cocaine's evolution. It started as a sacred plant used ceremonially by indigenous peoples. It became a colonial tool of exploitation. It became a pharmaceutical miracle cure. It became a party drug for the wealthy. It became crack that destroyed poor communities. It became a CIA funding source for illegal wars. And now it's a contaminated product that kills users who think they're buying pure cocaine. Every stage of this history shows the same pattern. Cocaine enriches some people while destroying others. And the people who get rich are never held accountable for the devastation they cause. The complete history of cocaine is a history of colonialism, capitalism, racism, and government corruption wrapped around a plant that's been used for thousands of years. The Spanish used it to exploit indigenous labor. Pharmaceutical companies used it to make fortunes while creating addicts. The CIA used it to fund illegal wars while crack destroyed black communities. Cartels use it to build empires while bodies pile up. And governments respond with punitive laws that target the poor while protecting the wealthy and powerful. The 100-to-1 sentencing disparity wasn't reduced to 18-to-1 until 2010. It took 24 years to partially fix a law that everyone knew was racially unjust. Thousands of people served decades in prison for possessing amounts of crack that would have gotten a white person probation if it had been powder cocaine. That's not justice. That's institutional racism enforced through drug policy. The CIA has never been held accountable for facilitating cocaine trafficking. No one went to prison. No one faced criminal charges. The agency admitted wrongdoing in reports that few people read, then continued operating with the same lack of oversight. Gary Webb exposed government-sanctioned drug trafficking and died in disgrace. The officials who ran those programs retired with pensions and honors. That's the lesson of cocaine's history. The drug destroys individuals, but institutions profit, and accountability never comes. Pablo Escobar killed thousands and died in a shootout, but the cocaine trade didn't end. New cartels emerged, new smuggling routes opened, new dealers took over street corners. The business model is too profitable to disappear. Cocaine generates approximately $80 to $100 billion per year in revenue globally. That's more than the GDP of most countries. That kind of money doesn't disappear because one cartel leader dies or one smuggling route closes. The demand persists. As long as people want cocaine, someone will supply it. As long as there's profit in trafficking, cartels will exist. As long as poverty creates desperation, people will participate in the drug trade for economic survival. And governments will continue using drug policy to control populations rather than address root causes. The war on drugs was never about eliminating drugs. It was about controlling who uses them and punishing undesirable populations. Richard Nixon's domestic policy chief, John Ehrlichman, admitted as much in 1994. You want to know what this was really all about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. That's the actual purpose of drug prohibition, not public health. Social control, targeting specific populations, maintaining power structures. Cocaine is the perfect example. Powder cocaine used by wealthy white people, lenient sentences, treatment options, social tolerance. Crack used by poor black people, mandatory minimums, mass incarceration, community destruction. Same drug, different users, different outcomes. That's not accidental, that's by design. The complete history of cocaine shows that drugs are never just drugs. They're tools of colonial exploitation, capitalist profit, government policy, and social control. The Inca used coca ceremonially in a controlled way that caused minimal harm. Spanish colonizers turned it into a tool of oppression. Pharmaceutical companies turned it into a profitable commodity. The wealthy turned it into a status symbol. The CIA turned it into a funding source for illegal wars. The government turned it into a justification for mass incarceration. And cartels turned it into an industry that generates billions while killing thousands. None of that is inherent to the drug itself. Cocaine is a chemical. The harm comes from how it's produced, distributed, and regulated. The destruction comes from prohibition, creating illegal markets controlled by violence. The injustice comes from laws designed to target specific populations. The modern cocaine crisis, fentanyl contamination killing users who think they're buying pure cocaine, is the inevitable result of prohibition. In a legal, regulated market, products would be tested for purity. Contamination would be criminal. Users would know what they're consuming. In an illegal market, controlled by cartels, there's no quality control. There's no accountability. There's just profit and death. And governments prefer that to legalization, because prohibition serves political purposes that public health doesn't. The complete history of cocaine is the history of how a plant becomes a weapon, how governments use drugs to control populations, how profits matter more than lives, how the wealthy escape consequences while the poor face incarceration. 5,000 years from sacred Andean plant to global crisis, from religious ceremony to colonial exploitation to pharmaceutical profit to cartel violence to government-sanctioned trafficking to mass incarceration to fentanyl-contaminated death. And at every stage, the pattern is the same. Some people get rich, some people get destroyed, and no one powerful faces accountability. That's cocaine. The drug that built empires, funded wars, destroyed communities, and proved that drug policy has never been about public health. The CIA facilitated trafficking and faced no consequences. Gary Webb exposed it and died. Thousands served decades in prison for possessing crack, while powder cocaine users got probation. Cartels kill thousands, and the business continues. 27,000 Americans died from cocaine, involved overdoses in 2022, most from fentanyl contamination. And governments respond with the same failed prohibition that created the crisis in the first place. That's the complete history of cocaine. From sacred plant to deadly contraband, from Inca ceremony to cartel massacre, from CIA funding source to fentanyl-laced death. And the lesson is always the same. Drugs don't destroy communities. Drug policy destroys communities. And the people who make that policy never face consequences for the destruction they cause.